Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
There's a watch. Hello. Hello. There. My name is Tom, and I am an alcoholic. Well, I mean, I've gone to some meetings where I've been listening to speakers, trying to figure them out, like what's their story. And you have to read between the lines and analyze them a lot and put them on the couch. So I'll just tell you, what's really wrong with me on a regular basis. Let me see. I did a presentation a while ago at a place I was telling this to George, for nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals up in Oakland, and a lot of them worked with us, and a lot of them were us, but some weren't, and we were doing a kind of a professional shtick there. So at the end of it, people did evaluations, and most people liked the day and were pretty positive and liked the way I did things. And then there was one person that said, good information, but Tom is severely mother conflicted, full of anger, and crippled with type A behavior. So that's just to let you know that now, so you don't have to worry about that at the end. The only thing I objected to in the description was severely mother conflicted. I think I've worked through a lot of it, but what do I know? It also occurred to me that one of the reasons that I can connect so easily with people is because of those things. I mean, people keep going, oh yeah, me too. I'm angry at a lot of things, but they're pretty current things. And I like that. I took a nap this afternoon, and I'm pro-nap. I'm willing to speak out on controversial issues. I found that when everything makes no sense and I'm confused and off balance and I just can't stand what to do next, lunch helps, or taking a nap helps. It just does. So anyway, I took a nap this afternoon, and I woke up, and I don't know whether it occurred in a dream, but my very first conscious thought with waking up were two resentments that are over 30 years old that I haven't thought about in a real long time. And one of them was a teacher of mine in 1961 in San Jose, California, in a particular Latin class at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was vividly there, and I was just enraged for the next half hour. So it's clear I need this program. Because I used to mix up having resentments with having principles. There is a difference, by the way. There's a real difference, and it's subtle, but I thought that if I just hated enough people, I was very principled. And one of the biggest energies that I could get was having resentments and holding grudges and hating people from year to year to year. I was sober a little bit, and it was explained to me that if we're ever going to get well, we have to get rid of our resentments and our old rage. And I was horrified by this. I didn't say, oh, what a good idea. My thought was that if I let go of all of my resentments and rage, there'd be nothing left. And I kind of hoped that if I let go of all that stuff, I wouldn't remain an empty shell, that the higher power would fill it, And I think that is true, but I still get angry real easily at lots of people on a regular basis. And I think that means I'm alive. I get a little nervous around people that don't get angry. I just conclude they aren't paying attention. Okay, what else is true? I'm 41 years old, in case that's a question for you. I live in Oakland, California. I'm just down here for an event tomorrow morning at Loyola Marymount University. I'm a Catholic priest in reasonably good standing with the church and my order, which surprises me sometimes as much as it surprises them. I haven't had to drink or use since mid-August 1976. I was 29 years old. I just completed my second year of theology at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, and I had just crashed and burned. I was encouraged to crash and burn by members of my community who did an intervention on me, and it was a humiliating experience, and I was very embarrassed by it. But the result of it was I did go into a treatment program. I'm one of the people that went into a treatment program. I went into a 21-day program. What they stressed there was, it was in Berkeley, so I actually did get sober there. What they stressed there was, no matter how good the treatment program is or how long the treatment program is, people who leave treatment and connect with AA get sober. People who leave treatment and don't connect with AA get drunk or crazy. So I just knew that, and I was real lucky because I didn't like the treatment facility. So I didn't want to stay connected to it, but they took us out to meetings, and I began connecting with people at meetings, and that saved my life. What else is true? I'm Aries. You got to know these things. I'm the youngest of three sons in a dysfunctional family. We're half Swedish Lutheran and half Irish Catholic. Little alcoholism on both sides of the family. We never talk about it, of course, because it's what keeps the family together. So we don't discuss it. On the Swedish Lutheran side of the family, we talk about nervous people. And I have cousins who are so nervous they get hospitalized pretty regularly, but they're not alcoholics. On the Irish Catholic side of the family, we don't have alcoholics either. We have characters. And I was sober for a while before I figured that one out, because you're just supposed to, I guess, read between the lines, and I didn't. I take a lot of things at face value. So when they said, Sean, he's such a character, I thought it meant get to know Sean. It doesn't. It meant don't let him drive. That's what it meant. As long as I can remember, we had alcohol around the house, and I started drinking real young. I was young enough to think that mixing Hershey syrup and bourbon was a good idea. It really was, too. It was wonderful. I'll tell you, at the age of 6, it gave you something to look forward to. And I graduated to cream de menthe for a while. And then I got into high school. And I'm one of those people for whom drinking worked for a long time. And I also, when I did taste it, I liked the taste. I liked the effect. I liked everything about it. I didn't throw up very much either. Jane mentioned she was a throwing up drunk. I rarely threw up. I had a tremendous capacity for booze. And I got that all mixed up with being a grown-up and being masculine and being mature, that I could hold my booze. I have, what else is true here? I read the book every so often. Now usually when I'm in intense pain and my sponsor's machine isn't working. What did we do before answering machines were invented is my question. I don't know. I'm a 20th century alcoholic. Anyway, I have lots of troubles with the book, and I've had to find a way of using it on a regular basis. And I want to say, this is a tool, it's not a shrine. If you've had it for 5 years and it's still unopened, it's a shrine, And I find I read it, I disagree with parts of it, I cross parts out. I suggest that if you do, you cross them out in pencil, because the next year you have to erase what you crossed out and underline it as the most important part of the book. pretty embarrassing. Or you have to keep buying new books, and that's expensive. So do a lot of crossing out in pencil. I tried reading it from start to finish like you would a novel, and it wouldn't work for me. I never read Roman numerals. I figured, why waste time? You know, let's just buzz up to the Arabic numbers, and I would start, you know, Bill's story. War fever ran high in the New England town. You know. Can't wait to get into that one. And I would think to myself, am I the only person that finds this dull? Because everyone else at AA said this book saved their lives, you know, and so it was my secret for a long time. Until I thought it really is dull. A lot of it is real dull, and a lot of it depends on my mood. And when I'm open, I can read it and get stuff out, and when I'm shut down, I don't even take it off the shelf. But the way I had to start reading it was I have to open it up at random and then go for 5 pages. That's how I can read the book. And the little custom that my sponsor recommended, who's a tyrant, was that when I should date, in small little things, just put the month and year and the corners so you know when the last time you read that was. And I find it's amazing. There are parts of the book I've never read. I've no date. And others I keep getting, there's a whole list of dates right down the side, and it keeps changing. Anyway, that's what I do. And I found something that was brand new. This was in the stories, which I never read either because I thought they were so hokey. And it's the one entitled, He Had to Be Shown. That's how you have to read that title, with a deep voice. And he says here on page 194, and I identify with this paragraph absolutely, and this was a lot of my high school drinking, a little bit of it. He said, when I was 18 at the end of high school, the high school team had a banquet at a well-known roadhouse outside of Akron. Roadhouse. I have a suspicion that in a few years we're going to have to publish the companion to the big book, in which we explain mid-century Midwestern slang. Stuff that we haven't used since Roosevelt's third term. You know, the American language changes, and one of these is roadhouse. And it was a place where you could get a meal and a drink, I guess, kind of a restaurant. Bob's Big Boy with a bar. Well-known roadhouse outside of Akron. We boys drove out in somebody's car and went to the bar on the way to the dining room, and I, in an effort to impress the other boys that I was city-bred, having lived in Scranton and Cleveland. I love that. By the way, I'm also a snob. Snob. In an effort to impress the other boys, asked them if they didn't want a drink. They looked at one another queerly, which implies that even then, you know, there was a lot of people around town. They looked at one another queerly, and finally, one of them allowed he'd have a beer. And they all followed him, each of them saying he'd have a beer too. I've done that. I mean, oh yeah, I'll have one of those, sure, and you have to look real cool. I ordered a martini extra dry. I didn't even know what a martini looked like, but I had heard a man down the bar order one. That was my first drink. If you can remember your first martini for just... Now, I spent a year in college having a significant relationship with martinis, and it was what I loved, and I wanted to have the reputation where I could go into any bar and they would say, got your drink ready for you, Tom. They would know what my drink was. I thought that was very sophisticated, and that I would be known as Tom Drinks Martinis, very dry. I thought that was very suave. So that was my first drink. I kept watching the man down the bar to see what he did with a contraption like that. And he just smelled of his drink and set it down again. So I did the same. He took a couple of puffs of a cigarette, and I took a couple of puffs of my cigarette. He tossed off half of his martini. I tossed off half of mine, and it nearly blew the top of my head off. Yes. It irritated my nostrils. I choked. I didn't like it. There was nothing about that drink that I liked, but I watched him. And he tossed off the rest of his, so I tossed off the rest of mine. He ate his olive, and I ate mine. I didn't even like the olive. It was repulsive to me from every standpoint. And my favorite line, I drank 9 martinis in less than an hour. We could read that at meetings with lots of newcomers, you know, I think identify a little here. Anyway, the book has been one of those things that I've used off and on for a long time. And I do bump into people who in their program do the same thing every day. And I think in their lives they do the same thing every day. I'm not one of those people, and I don't recommend doing it my way. The great thing that it has always motivated me to work a step or let go of something has been pain. And I mentioned this. I was in a meeting in San Francisco last Wednesday night, and I mentioned this, and a fellow there said that I shouldn't say that. That I should really want to seek spiritual growth for its own sake. Well, that may be true, but I don't. I get real comfortable real fast, and then I want to stay there for years. And I don't want to get more tolerant, and I don't want to get more understanding, and I don't want to get more compassionate, because all that opens you up for trouble. I would just as soon get a little warm, you know, and a little safe, and a little comfortable, and lock the door. And then this pain comes along. So maybe that's what I'll talk about tonight. I was under the impression that you hit bottom and came into the program and lived happily ever after. That's what I hear, you know, from a lot of podiums. And then, you spend 40 minutes of your pitch talking about how awful it was, and then 5 minutes about the last 35 years of joy. And that hasn't been my story. I have found one reason why I want to talk more about my sobriety is because I remember a lot more of it. And also, a lot of my drunkalog is real dull. You know, if I had a really great one, I'd probably talk about it a lot. I drank a lot. I drank on a daily basis. I got into a little bit of trouble, not much. I've never been fired from a job because of my drinking. I was a teacher. I taught at Loyola High School here in LA for 7 years, 3 of them drunk and 4 of them sober. I think that balances out. What else is true? I've never gotten a drunk driving ticket. I drove lots of drunken miles, but I have never gotten a drunk driving ticket. I have never spent time in jail. I have not lost family. I mean, there are a lot of yets out there for me. So how do I know I'm an alcoholic? Well, I was dying. And I think that's okay to come in when you're dying. I could have continued drinking and abusing and dying an inch at a time for 30 more years. I could have died that night on my own vomit. Or like one of our brothers back east, I could have gotten real drunk and gotten behind a wheel and plowed into a busload of kids. Any one of those could have been what I did. For some reason, in 1976, a door opened. And I was kind of shoved through it, and I cooperated enough where things started falling into place. And if I didn't do it that day, it may have been another 15 years before another door opened. I don't know those things. I'm not good on ultimate answers or what things mean or what's the purpose of it all or how does it all fit together. I don't know those things. All I know is I was able to walk through it at that time, and I came into Alcoholics Anonymous numb from head to toe. Emotionally real numb and intellectually real numb and physically real numb. And getting into... my favorite kind of drugs have always been depressants. I don't need up. I need down. And when I get real down, and I loved marijuana. I smoked non-habit forming marijuana every day for 7 years. Until I went to my first AA meeting. And this guy I said, I had 3 days clean and 3 days sober, still smoking dope because I needed to. this guy said, we here at Alcoholics Anonymous go to a lot of meetings, we don't drink in between meetings, and we don't use no dope. And he didn't say, try to use no dope, or see if you can get to a lot of meetings, or manage to fit into your schedule. I mean, he just laid it right out there, and I was real glad dope got talked about at my first meeting too, because it let me know that that doesn't work. And I was so broken and confused and battered and vulnerable that night that when he explained, we go to a lot of meetings, we don't drink and we don't use, I just believed him. And I was so stupid, I did not know you could leave if you didn't like it. So I figured I'll do those 3 rules. And so from that Friday night, you know, the marijuana, but the thing with the downers, what I liked about it was it made me feel spiritual. My sponsor says that the best thing about, he says the thing with booze and dope, it's the closest thing to a spiritual experience that isn't. But what I can do with it is smoke some grass and have, of course, something very fashionable to drink, like Jack Daniel's Rocks, shaved ice, and stare at the wall and think I'm communing with the greatest powers in the universe, and get these real deep insights and feel real deep. And just slow down to nothing. Be there for hours. Let's play that song again. One of my favorite songs while in that state was Isaac Hayes from his Hot Buttered Soul album. The song was By the Time I Get to Phoenix, and he would sing it for 18 minutes, and I would play it for about 4 hours. Neighbors complain, but I felt spiritual. You know, all right. Well, coming into recovery, when the depressants are removed, you start waking up. And I was here for a while before someone explained to me that spiritual law of cause and effect, which says causes have effects. If you take large numbers of depressants and put them in your body on a daily basis for years, you will get depressed. Is that too subtle for the group? I didn't know that. I thought I was depressed because of the president, or because of my folks, or because of the Pope, or because of the weather, or the governor, and instead it's because I took every depressant I could find and shoved it into my body on a daily basis for years. So, coming into AA, numb. Stop the depressants and you start waking up. And I did not wake up polite. That's one thing I mean, newcomers here tonight, you know, you say that some folks at, you know, who were 3 months and just glad to be here, and 6 months and glad to be here. I wasn't. It was awful. I was put in a hospital for 21 days, and in hospital we did group a lot. And you sit in a circle, and there's a shrink and a nurse and a, you know, someone with a gun, and you share. And I guess I was there about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, somewhere around there, and I had this tremendously uncomfortable physical sensation. It was like I had slept wrong on my arms and legs, and that suddenly blood was pouring into my hands, and it hurt. It felt awful, and it was boom. There was nothing, and then this terribly uncomfortable sensation, and I got up out of my chair and I said, "My arms and legs are coming off." And the nurse said, "That is called sensation." And it is returning. And this is a very good sign. And they explained to me that sometimes when we're terribly uncomfortable, it's a very good sign.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
Because it means something's coming to that used to be unconscious or asleep, or something suddenly waking up that hasn't participated at all, and it's very disorienting. Now that's a whole new notion to me. Where I went went to, dried out in, it was next to the burn unit in this hospital. And I don't know if any of you have ever gone through burn units, but they are real intense. And it's one of the most heavy-duty places to work in a hospital as a nurse. Burn is a severe shock to the body. The hardest shock the body can get, I do believe. And if someone is burned very badly over a vast amount of their body, they don't feel any pain for a while because all the nerve endings are burned off. They leak a lot, and they're very susceptible to infection because their skin's gone, and it's very risky and very dangerous, and it's highly intensive, but they aren't hurting. When they start getting well, the first sign of their recovery is that their nerve endings grow back. And how do you know their nerve endings are back? Pain. And they begin feeling pain, and they begin saying, I'm going to die, I can't survive, this is the most awful thing I've ever experienced, it's terrible. And the people on the staff wander around saying things like, this pain means you're getting well. Walk through this one day at a time. We'll be there with you. If you weren't feeling pain, you would not be getting well. I have to remember that on a regular basis, because a lot of times recovery for me means something is hurting which should be hurting, but it hasn't hurt for a long time. And what I began feeling at about 3 months was feelings. Now, I'm not good with feelings. I retreated into my head years before, and I found that in my family, where feelings weren't tolerated, book reading was. And by the time I got sober, I was in the 93rd grade. Educated almost to the point of complete dysfunction. And at the slightest inconvenience, I'll go right back to my head. Let me figure this one out. And I will call my sponsor, because I'll get a new insight, and I'll try to explain it to him by using small words and repeating myself a lot. And he will say, Tom, insights are not your problem. Behavior is your problem. This is not a program that changes insights. This is a program that changes behavior. And if you don't change your behavior, you'll never get well. Now, I hate that, because I want to continue doing the same old things, but think about them differently, you see? But that's not the way it's worked for me. So we get back to 3 months, and the feelings that I began feeling were feelings of rage and fear, and they'd come in waves, and they'd come irrationally. I mean, it was like they were waking up and starting to move, and it could be 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I could be in a room full of people or by myself. I could be at a meeting or I could be in church. All of a sudden, this vast amount of emotion would roar through. And I thought I was losing my mind. And it was like a roller coaster. And it would stay for a while and then go. No, maybe not. See, it wasn't being on the roller coaster. Okay, that's a good image. But more for me, the feeling was I was in the ocean and these were waves coming. You know, and if I just stood still and didn't do much, it would pass. I was in therapy. Does that surprise you? I was in therapy, and I was having a very bad time. A lot of things were falling to pieces, and I was waking up and panicking, because see, a lot of what my drinking did, it was killing me. And my drinking made my world smaller and smaller and smaller. And creativity was gone, and imagination was gone, and whimsy was gone, and humor was gone. And my world, instead of being a big one with a lot of different, became real tiny, and it kind of resolved in my room, and that's where I was safest, and that's where I spent a lot of time. But I sure controlled everything there. And I only thought certain thoughts, and I only felt certain feelings, and I only did certain things, and I was in charge. Recovery has demanded that the room's gotten bigger. So feelings I didn't like feeling started coming up. And thoughts I didn't like thinking started coming up. And situations that I didn't understand, I found myself in the middle of. And I panicked because I said, I'm losing control. And I was, but I had never had control. But everything was getting bigger and scarier. That roller coaster of feelings with the rage and the fear, usually followed by exhaustion. I remember how tired I was. There'd be times when I couldn't sleep at all for 2 or 3 nights, and then I'd sleep pretty much nonstop for 2 or 3 days. And then I'd get by with very little sleep, and then I'd sleep for 18 hours without even turning over. Appetite would go wild. No food, I couldn't stand, then I would eat everything that moved. It was real erratic. And so at 3 months, at 6 months sober, I felt worse than I felt at the end of my drinking. And that's a real good sign. Because it means we're coming to. It meant the world was getting a lot bigger. I was 3 years clean and sober. At my first year birthday, I was depressed because I hadn't had a drink or a joint or a pill in a year. So what? Nothing had changed. I was still rigid and angry. And where were the promises coming through? Well, by the way, I wasn't working steps yet either. But what does that have to do with the promises? I was going to meetings and not drinking and not using, and that was my program. And if that's all you do, go to meetings, don't drink, don't use, you become in a short time what the other 12-step program refers to as stark raving sober. And people who love you say things like, when you were real drunk with the gun and the axe in the living room setting fire to things, you were a lot more fun to live with than you are now. They start giving you bottles of booze for your birthday. At least when you were in jail, we knew where you were, things like that. So pain got me into steps, and I don't work steps because I think they're a good idea. I work steps when I'm absolutely desperate and I have to do the next thing. Step 1 has not been a problem for me. I knew things were out of control. I was relieved to find out I was powerless. I did a presentation with a physician who's sober in San Francisco. He's a tough French Canadian named Dr. Gill. He's been sober for 2 million years. And Irish Catholics think that Irish Catholics are tough. But that's because they haven't met a lot of French Canadians. French Canadians are tough people. They really are. And there's just well, anyway, Gil and I were doing this presentation before a group of decent people who were largely nurses and people who would be working with drunks and junkies and didn't know much about us. So he was talking as a physician in recovery, and I was talking as a priest in recovery. He was describing livers and kidneys and things, and I was talking about, steps and program, prayer, meditation, 11th step, and how can you help someone in, the treatment union, da-da-da-da-da. So, question answer time, and someone raised their hand and said, well, Dr. Gill, alcoholism is a disease, right? And he says, yes. And she said, with clear symptoms, right? Yes, clear symptoms. In fact, he said, since the mid-1950s, alcoholism is easily diagnosed by a competent physician. Easily. That's, by the way, very strange. I mean, I think it's the biggest secret in the world. Do you think you might be an alcoholic? Find a competent physician. Sure, bomb. Sure. Okay. Doctor, do you think I may have a drinking problem? Or was it just a phase for 20 years? Anyway. I think like that. So that was with early symptoms. So then this person said, well, doctor, if someone's showing early signs of alcoholism, can't we just sit them down and say, listen, you're showing early signs of alcoholism. You better stop drinking tonight. Why? Don't you think they would? Wouldn't this be a service? Can't you just say no? And Gil stopped. I didn't know what to say to that one. And Gil stopped and he said, it won't work. He said it won't work because alcoholism, she has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the fun phase. when you are having fun. Now you look and see early signs of alcoholism, but the alcoholic sees, I'm having fun. And when you sit a 15-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 26-year-old or a 40-year-old down and say, don't you realize that you have a disease that is going to destroy everything you've ever owned or possessed or loved? Their response will be, what do you mean? I'm having fun. See? Phase 1. He says phase 2. Phase 2 is fun plus problems. He said, this is when you're still having fun, but you start to have problems. Lose your first job, get your first divorce, be hospitalized for the first time, start to have problems. And then he says, phase 3 is problems. The VINCI's gone. Now, he says, if you know someone who is having fun, get out of the way. And hope that they get down to problems, because when they get down to problems, some of them seek help, but a lot don't. So, well, I had been in problems for 5 years. Easily 5 years, and the fun had been gone for a long time. The book talks about never again could we recapture the great moments of the past. That's what I was trying to do. When I found that there were whole rooms full of us that knew, it was a wonderful experience for me. I was sober a year or two and still feeling pretty angry about being here. I didn't think it was fair for me at the age of 29 to have to get sober. I saw that the best years of my drinking were ahead of me, and if I could just get it down right, I should be able to have a wonderful 20 more years of drinking before I'd have to retire at 65 anyway, and I was willing to do that, but it was unfair, and I was angry, and I felt this was unjust. I was at a meeting in the San Fernando Valley. I don't know where the meeting was. It was a speaker meeting. The guy who was speaking was a middle-aged Caucasian male. That's all I know about him. I don't remember his name. I was way in the back judging others, so I didn't get a chance to get his face clearly. But he said something that just, this light went on, and it was this. He said, my name is whatever. He said, I'm an alcoholic. He said, and I'm not grateful that I'm an alcoholic. I had never heard anyone say that at the meeting, because everyone's grateful and so glad to be here and love their sponsor and do the 12 steps and, are working on their 4th step now. And I was not one of those people, and I would just feel so guilty and wrong because I was sitting there with what we call attitude and resentment, and I'm not going to do anything unless I absolutely have to. Anyway, he said, I'm not grateful that I'm an alcoholic, and he paused for a second, and then he said, but I'm real grateful you folks are. And that was the first gratitude connection I had in AA. I was real grateful you were alcoholics too, because you gave me a place to come to. My first meeting, where they explained to me those dreadful 3 rules about going to meetings and not drinking in between meetings and not using dope, I spoke at that meeting. It was a discussion meeting, and I raised my hand and I said, my name is Tom and I'm an alcoholic. This was a Friday night old-timers meeting, and they were all real old. And I was in a particularly hairy phase of my existence at the time, kind of ponytailed and jeaned and sandaled and bearded and angry. I said, my name is Tom, I'm an alcoholic. I said, I haven't had a drink since Tuesday night. Now, I was going to go on and say stuff about what it all meant and what the purpose was and, how the universe fits together and how I really understand step 3. And when I told these people with whom I had nothing in common, they were too old and too straight and too square and too weird. When I told them that I hadn't had a drink since Tuesday night, these people burst into applause. I was really not used to that. when I had talked to other people about my lack of drinking, that I hadn't had a drink in 2 weeks or 5 days or a month, they never clapped. Sometimes they'd change the subject. Sometimes they'd look real embarrassed. Sometimes they'd ask the children to leave the room. I remember I was 5 years sober and clean, and I was teaching at Loyola High. And I went up to one of the guys who was running the school, and I was kind of, at 5 I was kind of happy. I mean, not real happy, but, you know, getting up there. And I said, you know, today's my 5th birthday. I haven't had a drink or a joint or a pill in 5 years. And he said, I'm so sorry. See, they don't get it. They don't know what the appropriate response is, and the appropriate response is passionate hugging and wild applause. And one reason why I keep going to meetings is because we're the only people that understand that. In fact, it made me another thing that made me a little angry. I was sober and back in the classroom teaching, which is another long and fascinating story. And I found out that if you're sober for a while, the people on the outside just presume you're going to be sober. I mean, you show up for work on time, sober, 4 days in a row. It is no biggie for them that you show up the 5th day on a row, sober and on time. I am amazed to show up anywhere sober. Anywhere, and that's still true. I am absolutely shocked that this is Friday night and I'm not loaded. I'm not terribly impressed about the fact that I haven't had a drink in almost 12 years, or a joint, or a pill. I'm real amazed about the fact that it's almost 9 o'clock and I'm not drunk. And my priority is very much today. I mean, do you ever think of having a drink? Of course I think of having a drink. It's one of the first things that occurs to me at the slightest bit of discomfort. Last November I was in the Denver airport, which is an awful experience in itself. Everyone I hate has a booth there, passing out literature. And I was hungry, I was angry, I was lonely, I was tired. I had just been on a tour of stuff, doing things and giving a couple of workshops, and I was in places like Oklahoma, and ended up in Denver, and I was hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and my plane was late. And I sat down next to this huge fat man who was smoking cigarettes without filters. And I didn't feel, when I get tired, I get numb. And I'm not saying, well, I'm feeling my feeling. I was just numb, but my fantasy life gets real busy. And I looked at this guy, and what I wanted to do was climb up on his lap and eat his cigarettes. That's what I wanted to do. And I haven't had to do that in about 9 years, but so I was surprised. And then I said, no, you know, you barely know him. If he was on the program, maybe, but you don't know that. And I said, I could buy cigarettes, I could buy a carton, or I could buy, and the rule of thumb, because your sponsor is never there when your brain is talking to you this, you know, firmly, I said, if I still want to have a cigarette tomorrow morning, I'll buy a cigarette tomorrow morning. I relaxed, boom, calm down, still numb. Next thought, next fantasy, there's the bar. Why don't you go over and have a nice brandy and soda? It's Sunday night, you're in a foreign state. No one will know, you know. And by the way, you should be able to drink a little brandy. No one has gotten drunk off brandy and soda. I mean, you know, and I learned, all right, no, if I still want to do this tomorrow morning, I'll do it then. So you put it off, calm down for a second, and the next thought was, why don't you just go to the men's room and hang yourself? And just thinking about hanging myself in the men's room took some of the pressure off. You know, I wasn't horrified by this, but it does, see, when I think, the way my head works, but isn't this embarrassing, and he's 12 years sober? The way my head works, if I'm uncomfortable, I want out. And I don't care how I get out. And I don't know what's going on. The first thing usually is run away from home, but I was already away from home. The second one is the cigarette, then a drink, and then suicide. By the time I get to suicide, I know something's going on. Now, I don't know what it is yet. And so I know, as soon as I got back, the plane was leaving, got on the plane, got back home. As soon as I got in, I called folks on the program, and I said, let me tell you about my behavior for the last couple of days, and let's find out what's going on. And what we discovered after talking to the third or fourth person, because my sponsor's machine was taking messages, he wasn't in, a few other folks, was that I was real hungry, and I was real angry, and I was real lonely, and I was real tired. And those things still complicate my life on a regular basis. So I had to, why do you keep going to meetings? Because if I don't keep on going to meetings, I'm a dead man. I'm one of those people who remains in desperate need of God's grace on a regular basis. And step one is still very true in my life, and the good news for me is step two. Because step two says there's hope. Step two says there is a solution, and my real act of faith. See, I know that God's grace will work for you. I'm not sure that it will work for me. This has always been my problem. I was talking to a fellow last night, and I'm over time. I'll stop right now. Who was saying that we were talking. This is a fellow who's going to be ordained tomorrow, a priest. We were talking about our problems with God, and he said he never had any difficulty with the idea of God. He just had difficulty with God. Now that's my story. I'm all for the concept, but I don't want to have to deal with the real McCoy. Because again, it means powerlessness, and if the program works for you, will it work for me? And I have been filled with such despair in my life, and most of my drinking is wrapped up in despair. The hopeless feeling that nothing will ever work and that I'm simply doomed. And all I have to do is have a couple of things go wrong, and my first response, even in June of 1988, is, I'm doomed. And I have to connect with people in recovery who tell me about hope, and that day at a time we can walk through this, and that God's grace can even work for you, Tom, because it has worked for us. And where I cooperate is when I can say that out loud. I'm real glad to be here tonight, and I'm real glad that we have a fellowship of women and men where I can connect, even as a supposed stranger, with a lot of people I've never met before, but I think a lot of us have an awful lot in common, and I'm real glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.